11 ridiculous things King Charles III's servants do for him. Did you know that King Charles III was commonly referred to as the pampered Prince of Wales? This is because of how dependent he is on his staff. Even before he became the head of the British monarchy, his servants were known to carry out almost all activities for him. Now that he's the king, this is set to get worse, especially for his staff who will have to cope with the demands of the king. In this video, we'll go over some of the ridiculous jobs the king's servants do for him. Number 1. The king has a Grand Carver. Grand Carver of England is one of the oldest jobs in the history of the royal family. Every sovereign that's existed in time past has had a Grand Carver. This job is considered very important and traditional in the royal family. It's usually passed down from generation to generation. The Grand Carver is usually employed by the king and has only one job to do as part of the royal household staff. His role is to perfectly slice and serve meat to His Majesty and the royal family during royal banquets and special occasions. The Grand Carver is expected to slice meat into regular sizes of length and thickness. In today's world, the role may be considered bizarre, but it's just one of the many jobs King Charles requires from his staff. Currently, the position is occupied by the Earl of Denbigh and Desmond. Number 2. King Charles has a specific food standard that must be met by his staff. We all have our individual food quality, taste, and standard, and so without exception, King Charles does too. However, the major difference is that unlike many of us, the king doesn't have to make his own food, which isn't really a surprise if you think about it. One of the king's dining habits involves making odd requests that might sound ridiculous to the rest of us. For example, according to a royal source, when it comes to biscuits and other cookies, the king demands that his staff pre-warm the biscuits or cookie to a particular temperature, or else he won't take it. And of course, nobody really wants to say no to the king, so his servants must, every time he requests a biscuit, pre-warm it. King Charles clearly loves his sweets because his staff keeps a warming pan nearby just in case he demands one, and they can quickly pre-warm it to the king's desired temperature. Also, the king only eats a light breakfast and one main meal throughout the day. The king does not lunch. Royal staff close to the king allegedly find it difficult to keep up with the king's demands. Number 3. The king has specific requirements for state banquets. We just mentioned that the king's staff have to cope with his solo eating demands. If you thought his individual eating standards were high, that's nothing compared to what he requires of his staff for state dinners and banquets. There have been many reports on what the king demands from his staff during these events. Most recently, Graham Tinsley, MBE, and former manager of the Welsh culinary team, says he personally experienced those demands during one of the royal banquets he attended. According to him, the king doesn't like chocolate, coffee, or garlic on his table during royal banquets. This means that the people serving at these banquets have to take special care to obey King Charles' demands. According to Tinsley, the king usually requests a type of salad containing coddled egg. You might be wondering what a coddled egg is. It's an egg that's gently cooked whole in a small dish that's placed in a hot water bath. Sort of like a poached egg, but the coddled egg is cooked in a coddler, so it doesn't actually come into contact with the water. During banquets, the king also requests green tea be prepared in a specific way. The loose green tea leaves have to be boiled to a temperature of at least 70 degrees. That's not all. During the banquet, the king has a few other requests that help make him comfortable, specific details of which have not been made public. However, you'll always know where the king's gonna be sitting because you'll see a silver Malden sea salt container at his seat. It's one of his favorites. Number 4. King Charles waited for his staff to make room on his desk for him. Some time ago, a video of how the king treated some of his staff hit the internet. It caused some buzz, especially on Twitter. The video showed King Charles' questionable behavior towards his staff. He was seen in the video clip expressing his frustration with his staff for not clearing up his desk while he was working. He was seen making gestures to his staff to come and clear the table and subsequently remove something from the table for him so he can continue working. From the video, it appeared the king was about to sign a document. However, the video was recorded as part of the official coverage of the historical event marking the British government's formal recognition of a new monarch. However, shortly after the video was posted on Twitter, there was a lot of backlash directed towards the king. People felt that the king's treatment of his staff was terrible, and that nobody, especially members of the royal family, should be treating people that way. One major takeaway from the video is an insight into how the king expects to be served. If we use this example as a basis for how the king lives his life, he's definitely the kind of person who expects even the smallest things to be done for him. Royal fan enthusiasts have been quick to exonerate the king, blaming the incident on poor desk setup. Regardless, it seems the treat others how you'd expect to be treated theory doesn't seem to apply to King Charles. Number 5. The king's morning routine requires serious patience. Remember we told you earlier that the king has a penchant for odd requests in his daily food habits? Well, it turns out that this penchant for odd requests extends for his daily routine as well. These odd daily routine requests could be frustrating and probably require a lot of patience from his staffers. However, because he's the king and now head of the royal family, his staff are expected to carry out his wish, whether it makes sense or not. According to Paul Burrell, who happened to work with Princess Diana and King Charles, the king likes to begin his day with a specific morning routine. Burrell says the staffers attached to the king have to carefully arrange the king's dress towels in a specific way. His pajamas are usually pressed every morning, along with his shoelaces. Yes, for his shoes. It might be ridiculous that the king requires that his shoelaces be ironed, but a request from the king is one that can't be ignored, no matter how ridiculous it may sound. Also, his bath plug has to be in a particular position and face a specific direction, and the royal staff is expected to do this every morning. Also, his staff is expected to squeeze exactly 1 inch of toothpaste onto his toothbrush every morning. This means that they have to be meticulous and ensure that it's 1 inch, otherwise, he won't use it. Number 6. There is no job guarantee with King Charles, no matter how hard you work. King Charles III has his preferences on how his assignments and requests should be carried out. He's shown himself to be a king who has strict rules and protocols, which is not really surprising. Even though he's heavily dependent on his staff, it's been discovered that any of his staff can be fired at a moment's notice, no matter how long they've been with him and regardless of the quality of service they provide. In September, when King Charles was crowned after the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, it was estimated that over 90 members of his staff were fired unexpectedly. This was reported by The Guardian, which said that some of those who were laid off were long-term staff of the former Prince of Wales. Understandably, the news of the layoffs caused major panic among the staff, who were worried about their own jobs. However, the king's personal assistant made a statement defending the mass layoffs, saying King Charles was adjusting to his new role as head of the British monarchy. Do you think that's a justifiable reason to lay off almost 100 people? Let us know in the comments. Number 7. King Charles expects the royal horological conservators to set every clock within the royal family space. Apart from the fact that King Charles has a unique way of doing things that he expects his staff to adhere to, King Charles is also a man of tradition. He's known to uphold every age-old royal family duty. Of course, this isn't really too surprising, because every member of the royal family is taught the importance of these age-long traditions. As monarch, King Charles expects the royal family's horological conservator to set all the clocks in the palace. According to estimates, that's about 1,500 royal clocks. The royal conservator is expected to set all the clocks, which are scattered across the different properties of the royal family accurately. They usually work with the royal collection team, and they're expected to set 450 timepieces at Windsor Castle, 600 at Buckingham Palace, and 50 at Holyrood House. The royal collection contains some of the finest historic clocks in existence, many of which are on display to visitors at Windsor Castle and the Palace of Holyrood House. They reflect mechanical innovation over the centuries and the tastes of successive monarchs. Among the 1,500 timepieces in the royal collection are musical clocks, astronomical clocks, miniature clocks, and turret clocks. This role requires a specific set of skills, which not everyone is qualified for. The royal family's horological conservators are well paid. It's estimated that their salary is about $50,000, and they're expected to work for at least 37.5 hours per week. Number 8. King Charles has got an astronomer to update him about astronomy. There are so many jobs and duties within the royal family. One of the more specific jobs is the royal astronomer. This job's been around since its inception by King Charles II, who charged the first astronomer royal with drawing up an accurate map of the night sky, which could be used for navigation. King Charles II appointed John Flamsteed as the first royal astronomer, and he was one of the most famous astronomers of his time. He served in that role between 1675 and 1720. Flamsteed ensured that the progress of the Royal Observatory and offered the royal family deep insight into astronomy with the wealth of his knowledge. Since Flamsteed, there have been many royal astronomers assigned to different kings or queens of England, including King Charles. Currently, the royal astronomer of King Charles III is Martin Rees, who's the Baron of Ludlow. Currently, the work of the royal astronomer requires them to advise the monarch on astronomical matters, whatever that means. And we're sure you're wondering how much the royal astronomer gets paid. Today, the post is largely an honorary one. The Astronomer Royal receives a stipend of £100 a year and is a member of the royal household. Number 9. King Charles has got a royal piper to wake him up every morning. The royal family has many age-long traditions which have been passed down for centuries. One of those traditions is the Piper of the Sovereign, or the Royal Piper. The royal piper is saddled with the responsibility of waking up the king every single morning by playing the bagpipes outside his window. The piper's sole job is to act as a human alarm clock to wake up the king. As we mentioned earlier, this is a traditional role that's been passed down for ages. It began with Queen Victoria more than 100 years ago and has been passed down ever since. The royal piper is expected to play the bagpipes for 15 minutes at 9 a.m. every single morning. Pipe Major Paul Burns was the final piper for the late Queen Elizabeth II and concluded his duties by playing Sleep Dearie Sleep at Westminster Abbey during her funeral last year. King Charles honored Pipe Major Burns with the task of continuing his piping for the new monarch. He began blowing for the king in October of 2022. However, it's worthy of note to point out that the king doesn't actually use the bagpipes as an alarm because he's usually awake before 9 a.m. This means Paul Burns plays as part of an age-old tradition, but an honorable one nonetheless. Number 10. The king expects the staff living in Buckingham Palace to follow a strict rule. Working for the royal family is a hell of a job. Working for King Charles specifically is worse. This is because the king himself has some strict code rules by which he lives, which he also expects his staffers to abide by. These rules and codes must not be broken. Staffers working for the royal family need to master all the particular details of the king's preferences, as well as the preferences of the rest of the royal family. This job is likely just as stressful as it sounds, because staffers are responsible for not just one royal, but all of them. It's therefore required that the royal staff members put extra care into executing their duties. This is a job that most definitely requires commitment. That said, Buckingham Palace is the official residence of the king. Inside Buckingham Palace, you'll also find different offices such as those of private secretaries, government liaisons, and media officers. The media officers are responsible particularly for the image projection of the king in the media. They help to prevent royal family scandals, something that seems to be getting harder and harder. For the king's staff living in Buckingham Palace, one major rule they're expected to follow is the no pet rule. Although the rule was initially laid down by the late Queen Elizabeth, who was known to be a lover of dogs and was met with quite a bit of public criticism. King Charles has not made any changes to the rule, despite having 2 of his own dogs. However, current staff members who call Buckingham Palace home are not allowed to have pets. Number 11. King Charles has a royal flag-bearer. The king's flag sergeant is another traditional role available in the royal family. It's usually carried out by a serving British military officer and a member of the master's household department in the British royal household. The military officer is usually a non-commissioned officer from the Household Division Brigade. Currently, King Charles' Flag Sergeant is Lance Sergeant Oliver Morton. He assumed the role in 2022 after King Charles was crowned. His major assignment, as demanded by the king and as a matter of custom, is to raise or lower the flag of the royal standard from Buckingham Palace when the king is in residence. He also does the same for the Union flag when King Charles is not in residence. The different flags which are used at Buckingham Palace are usually stored at the office of the Royal Flag Sergeant. The Flag Sergeant, as part of his duty, is expected to dispatch royal standards to places the king would be visiting within the United Kingdom and outside the United Kingdom. He would also carry some courier services for the Palace Post Office while assisting in other delegated duties. These are just a few of the numerous services offered by royal staff members to the king and the rest of the royal family. It's just easy to conclude that being a royal family member, particularly the head of the royal family, is a big privilege with lots of pampering that's certain to cause the rest of us to scratch our heads. That's all for this video. Let us know what you think about these roles in the comments section. And be sure to like and subscribe to our channel to get more updates from us. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.